fans, wherever you may be, welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers as we talk Seahawks football. Seahawks fans, welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers here for a fun show. We're going to do a mock draft, 7-round mock draft with trades, just to have a little bit of fun for this week, because everybody works all week, wants to enjoy a show where you don't have to think, you're just listening to ideas about what the team might do in a mock trade. So it's just all for fun, and we're here for it. So welcome in, man.
Yeah, these are always these shows are fun just because they're pure speculation, and you just get to look at a lot of different draft prospects and go, if I was building the team, what would I do? And then especially when you look back after the draft and you go, damn, John Snyder's better at this than I am.
Right.
But yeah, we'll see how we do. So we both did one trade.
Yes,
but you did not trade the first overall pick. So why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Yeah, I didn't. There's a few scenarios where you just kind of have to stay at 5. I was thinking in terms of CJ Stroud being there at 5, or possibly Anthony Richardson if the team seems enamored with him. And then Will Anderson Jr. I think that the team would stay at 5 for those players. Jalen Carter, not sure. I'm not sure. And we talked about that a little bit at the beginning of last show. They are investigating Jalen Carter as a team, doing their homework. It'll be interesting to find out what happens on draft day, but that wasn't a concern for me. I had a player drop in Will Anderson, and I think that's the player that I think Seattle would prefer to stay at 5-4 and run up to the podium and turn in the card. So that's my pick. Will Anderson, the edge rusher out of Alabama, would be a perfect fit in a 3-4 scheme as an edge and an outside linebacker role for the Seahawks. And he's probably one of the safer picks in the draft.
Yeah. Guys looks like an elite pass rusher. Just everything about him looks like a guy that people are going to love. And I don't know what else to say. He's just one of those guys that's just
right.
really, really good. So,
okay. So you said you made a trade.
I did.
What'd you get?
So my trade, I traded back from 5 to 9. And for that, I got the second round pick number 53 and a 4th round pick number 133.
Nice.
So interestingly, making this trade, there was a player sitting at 5 that I thought about drafting, and then I was like, you know what? I've done that draft. And so I'm going to move back and see what's there. And the guy that was there was Jalen Carter. And, he's dropping because of all the off-field stuff that's happened. Sorry, excuse me. Since the combine. And I'm like, you know what? If you move back and he's still sitting there at 9, maybe that's just a sign you need to take him and roll with it, because it's just an absolutely dominant interior, defensive lineman, and you just roll the dice as far as the immaturity stuff, and hope that it ends up not impacting the career.
And you picked up a 2nd round pick for doing
and a 4th round pick
and a 4th rounder. Yeah, so that's where it becomes a better value equation. And maybe that's the player they're targeting the entire time. We don't know, but I'm sure he was the target, Will Anderson and Jalen Carter, before things came out about Jalen Carter. If the team does their homework and they put it all together, all the puzzle pieces fit back together with Jalen Carter, and they decide to roll with that, I'd be happy. I mean, because of the play on the field, and hopefully it all comes together on the mental side with the team around him, the players around him, and so forth. As far as the leadership that we have,
Yeah. All
cool.
right. So who's your second pick
So
20, or did you move back at 20?
at 20, I did move back.
Okay.
So go ahead.
So I've got the next pick, which would be at 20. I stayed home there. I only made the one trade, so I'm done with the trades. But Nolan Smith was my pick, the edge
Nice.
rusher slash. I mean, he athletically he's bigger and more athletic than Jamal Adams. But he plays like on the edge. The guy can pass rush, he can cover, he just looks like he's going to be a dominant outside linebacker and a 3-4. Can move inside because he's got that size and ability to play just across the field and everything. Like you can really use him anywhere. He's like a super weapon on defense. And at 20, I couldn't pass that up.
Yeah, I tell you, he was gone. He went to the Lions at 18 in my draft, and with drafting Will Anderson there, you kind of diminish that need, and you're looking for other players. I would still consider drafting Nolan Smith, even with Will Anderson on the team, and I'd figure it out.
4.39 speed.
Yeah, I'd figure it out on the back end and try to find out if Nolan Smith can, and Will Anderson can be on the field at the same time. I don't know. But I went ahead and traded out of that pick. Minnesota came up and selected Deontay Banks, the physical corner out of Maryland, with that pick, and I dropped back to 23. In doing so, I picked up pick number 87 overall in the third round, and fifth round pick number 158 overall. So dropped back 3 spots, picked up a couple picks. And I went ahead and selected Mozzie Smith, the defensive lineman out of Michigan, with the 23rd pick. There's a lot of mocks now where he's starting to make it into the first round. He's just not there in the second round at all. So consistently being picked in the 20s, and definitely wanted to, when he was there, players like Jalen Hyatt, Julius Brents, other players were there, like Zay Flowers, Michael Mayer, or Osiris Torrance, Bijan Robinson, obviously, Kalijah Cansey. He was just going to be the best value out of those that fit what we need, and he's the pick, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, should be. That's if it's a need and it's a good player, someone I would have considered, but the Jalen Carter pick at 9 made it so I didn't need to. So at 37, right? That's a native pick. I went with a guy that I don't think I've mocked to Seattle, but I've looked at pretty much every time. And that would be safety Brian Branch out of Alabama. A guy that is not a in the box safety. He is a free safety, also can come up and play the slot and cover. Really kind of a scheme diverse player in that he can, do the slot stuff and, the free safety stuff. Reminds me a lot of Quandre Diggs, not the fastest guy, but really instinctual and does a lot of just really good things as far as like just anticipating, reading what the offense is doing, seeing route combinations and being able to recognize where he needs to be. And
Brian Branch is one of the best football players in the draft.
Yeah.
And as far as everything you just said, as far as being instinctual, a good player, smart, knows where he's supposed to be, doesn't leave his assignments, and just plays sound football. He's just a good football player. That would be a great pick. Solid pick.
Okay, who do you got at 37?
At 37, I chose Jalen Hyatt, the wide receiver out of Tennessee. History shows that Seattle takes wide receivers high if they want wide receivers that are going to make an impact on this roster. Didn't work out the last time we did that. This time, Jalen Hyatt, Tennessee, They take a chance on another wide receiver that's going to be able to take that third role right away. Potentially could work himself up into a, number one, number two wide receiver for the team in the long run. But for right now, makes that wide receiver room really strong.
Yeah, that would be a pick that I think they need to they need to make. They've got to get a wide receiver in this draft. Just they've got two on the roster that are high end awesome guys, but you're not going to be able to go through and just have two wide receivers. You've got to have at least a third and a fourth, and they need to make a pick like that where they can go
Yep.
get a impactful guy.
Yeah, I do think that Seattle makes a pick at wide receiver before the end of the second round.
Yeah, I didn't, but I could see it. In
Okay,
fact,
what do you got?
well, so yeah, my next pick at 52, I went with interior lineman prospect Cody Mock out of North Dakota State.
Interesting.
Played offensive tackle there. He doesn't have the length to, but the guy is a football player and will move inside at the NFL. And I think that he is going to move inside and be great. Has incredible athleticism for a guy his size, just doesn't have the length that you want at tackle. And I think he moves not just into guard, but to center. And to get him, he doesn't have to play day one, because if they signed a guy, he can come in and learn the new position, maybe take over mid-season, maybe take over next year. But I just think they need an interior alignment in this draft, and I couldn't go any further without grabbing one.
Interesting. I like it. So my pick at 52 was Julius Brents, the cornerback out of Kansas State.
Love that pick.
6'3", 200 pounds, 34-inch arms. Athletic testing was crazy with a 4.53 40, which is not extremely blazing, but the type of game that he plays, he's kind of a press guy, can play zone. Had a 41.5-inch vertical, 11.6 broad jump. Both those numbers are elite. And starts probably right away on the other side. And it's a solid pick. It's at a point in the draft where that cornerback makes sense for Seattle. It's not a complete pressing need, but best player on the board at that point, and you take him.
Yeah, I like that pick. So I have the next one at 53, the very next pick. So I picked Cody Mock at 52, and at 53, which I got as part of the trade, I went with Drew Sanders, linebacker out of Arkansas. This is a guy with tons of athleticism, um, can play interior, can move over and play, rush linebacker, can blitz up the middle. He's a guy that can do everything at linebacker. I think perhaps the best interior linebacker prospect in this draft. Um,
I
unless of
agree.
course unless you move Nolan Smith in, which I drafted at 20.
Yeah,
But
we've talked about that before.
Getting Drew Sanders at 53. Yeah, I've doubled up at linebacker, but you know what? The Seahawks need to double up at linebacker because they've got two healthy interior linebackers on the team, and both of them are in the final year of their deal. And so getting a chance to get two guys that have Pro Bowl potential made a lot of sense.
Yeah, this guy can line up inside and outside for you, really. Scheme diverse. He's great between the tackles, diagnosing, agility to run sideline to sideline, great speed, toughness, uh, sound tackler. Tremaine Edmonds reminds me of Tremaine Edmonds a little bit, which is a player that we talked about in the offseason that possibly Seattle could bring in. We went with Bobby Wagner instead, but adding this to Devin Bush, Bobby Wagner, Brooks, if they decide to keep him long term, and a guy like this would make me feel a lot better about the linebacker position for this team compared to last year. Okay, so I'm at 83. Is that the next pick? Okay, are you on mute by any chance? I can't hear you. Maybe not. No, there you go. I can
There we
hear you
go.
now.
Yeah. So 83 is next.
Okay, 83. So my pick at 83, I was lucky enough. I was thinking about going in a different direction, and then this player was available, and I pounced on it because it fills a need for the Seahawks. Luke Weipler, the interior
Yeah.
offensive lineman center from Ohio State, I think is a perfect scheme fit for Seattle. A little on the lighter side, but super athletic, kind of what they like to have out of their centers in this scheme. And yeah, it was an easy pick for me.
Yeah, I like that pick. It's one of those guys that never seems to be there where I want him. He gets drafted
Yeah,
like
I
2
know.
picks
Right?
before I'm able to select him just over and over again. And um, at some point you just that's why I
You
went with
gotta you
Cody
gotta start
Mock.
trading up in that spot.
Yeah, it's why I went with Cody Mock when I
Right.
did, because I knew that Weipler um, probably wouldn't be there when I would want to take him at this spot. And so yeah, I went ahead and didn't.
I was
Um,
ready to draft somebody else at 123-ish, to kind of work into that position, but by drafting Luke Weipler, I was able to get a potential starter in year 1 right there, which
yeah.
at pick 83, eh, I really like my draft so far.
Yeah. So at pick 83, I went with Tyreek Stevenson, cornerback out of Miami.
Nice.
Um, he's a big, corner. Okay, he's maybe at 6'0", maybe not big by Seattle standards, but he plays big and he plays physical, and he does a lot of press coverage and is patient in press coverage, which Seattle's going to like, because as they teach them the kick step move that they require out of their corners when they're pressing, um, it's going to come naturally to a guy like him that's patient, has the speed to recover if he does get beat. Very good 10-yard split at 151. So his acceleration is crazy. I think he's a perfect fit for Seattle's scheme. Um, and
Yeah, I like it
yeah.
because he's a great tackler, comes up and runs support really well. Pete's gonna love that. Good at ball skills, plays the ball really well. That's one of his best attributes. So I love that pick. At that spot in the draft, I think that's a great value. I've seen him go in the second round as well.
Mhm.
Some teams prefer him over other prospects. At I Part of my trade from dropping back from 20 to 23 was pick 87. With that pick, I chose Roshan Johnson, the running back out of Texas.
Mhm.
At this spot in the draft, it's a perfect time to get him. And by adding that extra pick, I didn't have to wait to see if he was going to be available in the 4th round. Went up and grabbed him at the back end of in the 3rd round. I think that's probably where he's going to go in the draft. Great fit for the Seahawks offense. A guy that's elusive, 6 foot, 215 pounds. Guy runs with physicality, but is also able to bounce a little bit, and very very much a guy that is surprisingly elusive and hard to tackle, hard to bring down.
Yeah, absolutely, and a guy that I love. He's a between the tackles guy that can get. Um, he's got speed and he's got that elusiveness, but he can also run people over. He's just hard to tackle,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
actually why I picked him at 123 when he was there,
Wow.
which is my next pick. Which I wasn't expecting him to be. I was expecting him to go in the 90s. When I took Tyreek Stevenson at 83, I was looking at Rashawn Johnson and was like, "Do I make that pick or do I wait?" And I'm like,
Yep.
you know,
Me
I
too. Me
I'm
too.
like, "Well, it's a player I've already talked about. We've already done a little bit." So I went ahead and took Stevenson, but then when Johnson was sitting there at 123, I was like, "Done." Like I didn't
Yeah.
even look at who else was available because like I said, I was contemplating him at 83. So here's him at 30 picks later.
Yeah,
40
it was
40 picks later.
for me, it was down to Zach Kuntz, the tight end that's really coming on. Drafted at 89 overall. Eric Gray was there, another running back. Zach Pickens, a defensive lineman. But with the picks that I had already made, that wasn't such a need for me. Ika was sitting there, a big, huge
Nose
um,
tackle.
nose tackle, but I already had Mozzie Smith. So
Mhm.
it was time for me to go ahead and make this selection. And again, when I take a look at my overall draft so far, I really like my my selections. Everything's just kind of lining up and falling into place for me. I'm not doubling up on positions at this point in the draft, and yeah, I've really helped my team.
So what did you pick at 123?
At 123, I went with J.L. Skinner, the safety out of Boise State. Fits the physicality the team likes. He's got some downside as far as coverage skills are concerned. He needs to work on those sorts of things. But a physical player at 6'4", with good size, good length, good physicality, a guy that can come right in and be a special teams player while learning the position. We're okay at safety, but with Jamal Adam questions long term, and Jordan Love only signed for his short amount of time, and then where we're at with depth beyond that at the strong safety spot. Now that we let Ryan go, Skinner comes in right away and has a role.
Yeah, I'm still annoyed at the Ryan Neal decision. But that's a topic for another show. So at the next pick was pick 133, which is what I got as part of my trade. And at that pick, I picked a player that you just mentioned, and that would be Zach Kuntz, tight end out of Old Dominion,
Yeah.
rising up draft boards simply because he is athletically freaky. And I get Old Dominion is not exactly a football factory, but the athleticism and stuff that he has is rare. And the Seahawks don't need him to come in and play and be great day one because they've got three really good tight ends. Kuntz has the athleticism to be the best, out of that room eventually. And I just felt,
What decisions need to be made on the roster this year? Do you carry
maybe you carry
4?
4. Maybe you don't have any wide receivers, so
Or do you
you
try
might
to
as well,
flip, get a pick for Parkinson or
or
maybe,
Disley.
or Fant?
Yeah, I mean, you
Okay.
could, depending on what's offered and what's out there, trying to get a pick for one of those. I think you carry 4 simply because you don't have any wide receivers, so you don't need to carry 6 wide receivers. You can carry fewer. You just don't have talent at the position, so keep an extra tight end, play a lot of 2-3 tight end sets, and use the talent where you got it.
Well, according to your draft too, we don't have any running backs either. Um, my pick at 151 was Ivan Pace Jr., the linebacker out of Cincinnati. The thing about this kid is he's totally undersized. He's 5'10" and a half, 231 pounds, short arms, but super quick agility. And they didn't draft him to be, a middle linebacker or anything. This is an edge rusher for them. And this guy has the agility to be able to do that. And just kind of rare quickness off the snap. So he's just super fast, super athletic in that respect. Long speed, not such an issue for him, but undersized, and he's just a pass rush specialist, basically.
Yeah. At this point in the draft, you like specialists, especially pass rushers. That's pretty good value. So at the same position there at 151, I went with Jair Brown, a safety out of Penn State. Yes, I've doubled up at safety.
Mm-hmm.
And Brown's an interesting guy because you watch his tape and you think he's like a second round pick. He's just rangy. He's everywhere. He makes a lot of plays on the ball, great tackler, all these things. And then he showed up at the combine and ran a 4.65 40, which you're like, ooh, that's terrible. But that included a 1.56 split, which is pretty good. So he was fast, like right at the first 10 yards, but then slow over the whole 40. It didn't make a lot of sense, and it doesn't really match his tape. But that has him sliding. I mean, has a guy that's dropped down quite a ways on draft boards recently. And I just felt like, as a potential guy that can play, anywhere at safety, play in the box, he can play
Mm-hmm.
deep, he can line up in the slot, just a lot of versatility. And so yeah, I doubled up at position, but I got a player I really like.
This is an interesting prospect for me in that the tape shows an outstanding player and the testing shows somebody that's that shouldn't be drafted high in the draft. And like you
Yeah.
said, before the agility, before the combine, this guy was projected to be in the second, third round, right in that range. Since dropped quite a bit just because the guy didn't put up, a 4.40. And so you just got to really look at that, find out. And to me, I think that's a great pick.
He didn't put up a 4.540. He
Right.
was a 4.65, which is really slow.
Right.
Um,
And
like you
so if
don't
he
draft
comes in at his
linebackers
pro
that
day
slow.
or he comes in private workouts and really improves on that, he could be a guy that's sneaky in back into the third round, I think. What'd you do at 154?
At 154, I went back to the defensive line and got Colby Wooden, defensive lineman out of Auburn. He's a guy that at 280 pounds is not going to play inside. He's going to be your 5 tech. He's going to be that guy that gets upfield, makes plays in the backfield, is inconsistent, which is why I think he falls this far. If you looked at just highlights, you'd think this guy was like a late round 1 pick. But he makes some plays where he just gets off the ball quickly and lives in the backfield. And then other plays he seems to just be a little slower reacting. And so I think that's going to make him drop. But the talent's there, the evidence is there. He flashes what you want, as that 5 tech. And so having him able to do those things as a rotational player, and maybe you can work on whatever it is that's causing him to show that inconsistency and get rid of that. And so he's a more of an every down player after a year or two, would be a nice addition. But I think just as a rotational guy at this point in the draft with his potential, it's looked like a good pick right
Yeah,
for
I
that
like
range.
it. High character guy, captain on Auburn's team. Yeah, I really like that pick. I went in a similar direction at 154 with Moro Ajomo, the defensive lineman out of Texas.
Yep.
For basically the same sort of reasons. High upside guy that can play 3 tech for you. If you're not going to draft Jalen Carter right at the top of the draft, a guy like this can come in and at least be in the rotation for you as a rookie, and we'll see how he develops.
Yeah.
I also had 158
Yes, you
as part
did.
of my trade down, and I chose Terrell Smith, the cornerback out of Minnesota. I've mocked him a few different times and talked about him. Good size, speed, and playability out of a corner. A guy that's a great tackler now, needs to work on a few ball skills, but when you get drafted in Seattle's defense, they've got some great coaching to coach you up on those things. But you can't teach the physicality and the athletic attributes that he has. So
Yeah, he'll be available in this range because there's plays like he's good at what he does in terms of being in coverage, but team threw at him even when he had good coverage because he didn't always get his head around. And he needs work at that. And I think he needs coaching. But in Seattle, he's not going to be asked to play right away. He's going to get a chance to develop, and that's going to be good for him.
yeah. Okay. So are you at 198?
I am.
What did you
So
got?
I got a guy that you'll like. I finally drafted a quarterback and went
Me
with
too.
Dorian Thompson-Robinson.
Oh my goodness. I went in a different direction this time.
And went UCLA, athletic guy, does a lot of running, older prospect. So you know how I don't like older prospects. But he was there, and I liked the idea that he would be able to come in and do a lot of the things that Geno Smith does with his ability to. He's not a guy that's gonna like light it up running, but he has the athleticism to extend plays and run when you need to. Big arm, maybe not always the most accurate arm, but a big arm, and overall just an experienced quarterback, 5-year starter.
Interesting. Yeah, I went with Clayton Tune, the quarterback out of Houston. I've heard a lot of good things about him. I've heard he's rising up boards. He had an impressive combine. He was there, made a lot of throws, also threw in some of the extra periods for the agility drills for the wide receivers there. Kind of made a name for himself. He's got some good stats, all that kind of stuff. 67, 68% passer, tons of yards. 4,600 yards in total offense just last year. Faces a lot of adversity. 4-year starter, team captain for 3 years. Works, his footwork is good. The arm is okay. It's adequate drive power to get that ball out into the edges and down the field. Just a developmental quarterback at this point. Dorian Robinson's got more upside and athletic traits that you like to see in a run pass option kind of a quarterback. Peyton Tune's not that, although he's tested very well athletically, around a 4.64 40. So he's not terribly slow. He can get out of the pocket for you and manipulate the pocket. But he's not going to be a threat to score a touchdown from any point in the field. But he's more of a traditional pocket passer.
Yeah, but he's a pocket passer with athleticism.
Yes.
So, and that's always useful. I mean, that's Geno Smith. He's a pocket passer with athleticism. He is not a running quarterback. And so getting a guy that kind of matches that, so you can move him around, but you don't have to. You know what I mean?
I actually see this guy being someone that I think the Seattle Seahawks are going to draft, honestly, especially if they don't address the position earlier. A guy like this can come in and learn the system. He'd be a perfect system quarterback for Seattle. I'm not saying he's going to light the world up, but as far as a backup quarterback, potentially take over, in a Brock Purdy type situation, if you had to, I think this guy could do it. And I think he's an interesting guy that we haven't talked about a lot. I haven't really considered. And now, I read some recent posts about him, so I thought I'd check it out and wanted to talk about him on the show a little bit.
Yeah, for me, it's I haven't researched him enough to know, but it comes down to, does he have the arm necessary to play at the NFL level? And that's going to be the question. And if he has the arm strength, then and the ability to get the ball outside quickly, then I think he has potential to do a Brock Purdy thing. If he doesn't, then he may not get drafted, and we may never hear from him again.
That's correct.
And that's just one of those things that I just don't know. And whatever NFL team drafts him, if somebody does, knows, they know what they're getting. And so I'm intrigued. I think that could be a very interesting pick.
All right, we're at the very end, Keith. 237.
So,
and go ahead.
I picked a player that I know you don't particularly like. And it's Chris Rodriguez Jr., technically a running back out of Kentucky. The guy's 240 pounds, and is just a battering ram. He comes in and runs people over. He's not shifty. He's just a straight ahead runner. Great blitz pickup. Just that size. He's got the ability to. He outweighs the linebackers. And so he is great at blitz protecting, and can wear teams down just, running right at him as a battering ram. But I think also he's got one of those guys that's going to be good on special teams, and I think and
he's big enough to be a linebacker. He could be the new Nick Bellore.
And that's actually what I was thinking, is that he would be a fullback. And be able to come up. He knows where the running lanes are. He's just got to get there. He doesn't have to get through the hole. He's got to make the hole by, getting there and hitting the linebacker. So having him play fullback in situation, not like the Seahawks use a fullback very often, but he's a guy that could definitely do it. I think that he,
a fullback has a role in San Francisco's offense, which is essentially the same offense we run.
Yeah, but we don't have Kyle Juszczyk in Seattle's roster. We've got Nick Bellore. So
right.
There's
so maybe Chris Rodriguez would have a little bit more athletic upside at that position. Maybe open up the playbook a little bit more.
It's hard to have less.
I went with a player that I know that you like, that you mocked before, and Yasir Abdullah. We just talked about him in our previous show when we talked about late round prospects that Seattle would look at.
Athleticism for days.
Yeah. And at that point in the draft, that's what you're going to do. And if he's
Mhm.
sitting there at that point, I think Seattle would kind of be all over that. They lack depth at the position on the roster and special teams. A guy like this is a special teams wizard because of his size, um, and ran a 4.47. And so you look at
Mhm.
a 6'1", 237-pound linebacker. He's got prototypical size of the position as far as being a linebacker in Seattle scheme, but he's got the quickness and the agility to potentially be an edge player for you if you want to play him on the outside. So I like the scheme diversity for him. Good prospect at that range in the draft. You just take a flyer.
Oh, I don't think you can take him at that range of the draft. I think you're gonna have to go at least a round earlier, just out of the athleticism. He's such a freaky athlete for, um, and just coveting special teams and the ability to come in. Plus, Seattle's linebacker core is so empty, at this moment that getting a chance to draft a guy like that. I actually considered him, but one, I'd done that draft before, and two, I'd already had Drew Sanders and Nolan Smith as guys that are going to be
Right.
linebacker candidates in Seattle. So I stayed away from that pick, but he was there, and I thought about it.
Cool. Cool. All right. Fun show. We talked about a lot of prospects. I like my value. How'd you like your draft?
I really liked my draft. I think moving back and then still getting Carter at 9 kind of set everything up. I went with a lot of defense, which Seattle needs. I didn't get a wide receiver, which is the one thing that I regret. There's some places in the draft where I should have and chose a defensive player instead. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's you end up at the end of the draft and you go, okay,
Yeah.
well, that's what happened.
I did the same thing, Keith. I walked out of this draft without a guard or an offensive tackle, even as a reserve. That's probably not going to happen with Seattle's
Yeah.
draft. I did get a starting center out of it. I like the top of my draft, where I think my first 6 picks in the top 100 have the ability to have an immediate impact on this roster. Similar fashion that happened in 2022. I think if we get Anderson and Mozzie Smith and Jalen Hyatt, Julius Brents, Luke Weipler, and Rashawn Johnson as the first 6 picks, I don't care what comes after that. I'm going to be liking that draft so much. I might not even watch day 3 of the NFL draft. It really wouldn't matter at that point. It'd be all gravy.
Well, yeah,
Um,
if you look at my first 6 picks, it was Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Brian Branch, Cody Mock, Drew Sanders, and then Tariq Stevenson with Rashawn Johnson coming as the 7th pick.
yeah.
Um,
Oh my goodness.
I see, Stevenson being the wild card there because cornerback's kind of loaded, but 6 of the top 7 as guys that are going to make an immediate impact.
So, and when you do these mock drafts, as we've done many, and we've done many more than we've even talked about on the show,
Hmm.
no matter which way you go, uh, we're going to have probably 6 players out of this draft that are going to have an immediate impact, because whether it's these players or different players, there's similar roles, similar players at different levels of the draft. It's hard to see the Seahawks failing this draft.
Well, you've got
I
six picks in the top 83.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I guess you got
you
5,
got
but then
5.
I traded back once and got a
Sure.
6th. So, it's just one of those things you've got, so much ammunition up near the top of the draft. That's you gotta be able to get good players there.
Yeah.
The idea that you're going to fail that many times on that many picks and not get impact players just seems improbable.
Right. It does. And I would be, I might not even be consolable if that should happen. And I don't know how that happens, but man, that would not be good. But I don't see it that way. This draft is really well set up for Seattle, especially if the first 2 picks fall um, really nice for Seattle. Everything else just really lines up nicely for them,
Mhm.
depending on how this goes. Now, obviously, a guy like Weipler is probably going to go in the 40 to 50 range for me in the real draft. Julius Brents might not be available at 52. Somebody might come up and try to get him. Jalen Hyatt might go in the first round. I got him at 37. Mozzie Smith may go slightly earlier than 20 or 23, where I had him. Will Anderson likely to not be available for Seattle, because Arizona looks like they're eyeing him to be the pick. But in my draft, Jalen Carter went to Arizona, you know, and so you just never know. But still amazing value, amazing players available to Seattle at all levels of the draft to be able to come in. So exciting times for sure. We'll have
Yeah.
one more mock draft prior to the real draft here in a few weeks. We're only 3 weeks away, Keith,
I know. We're only 3 weeks away. That's
or
exciting.
less than 3 now. So yeah,
Well, yeah, because it's weekend, so
very exciting.
um, couple days less.
Yep.
But yeah, the first round's going to be fun because Seattle has 2 picks. That one right at the top of the draft. You know, there's going to be a trade in there. This is going to be a lot of fun, a lot of excitement for Seattle fans. Which usually, during this era, there's been a lot of nothing going on in the first round because either they didn't have a pick or they traded out.
Yes.
Um,
Right.
and so, having 2 picks, probably not trading all the way out of it, even if they move down from 20. Um, and being able to get a couple of really good players, it's going to be fun.
And probably an additional pick in the top 100
Hmm.
by the time it's all said and done. Yeah,
Yep.
crazy. I don't know that I'd see them coming out. I had 12 players in my mock. I see them consolidating some of that to be able to move up in this draft at certain key points. The trade back, I think, is a strategy that will be employed at some point in this draft. I think at pick 20, depending on what happens at 5, that they like
Yeah.
at 5
I mean, you look
if Will
at
Anderson's not on the board,
yeah.
and the 3 quarterback problem at Carter at 9, as you did, would be an option. Or you take a look at wide receiver, maybe a cornerback, but there's not many positions that I would draft in the top 10, and
Mhm.
we already have our tackles taken care of, so we know we're not going to go in that direction. Um, it's hard to know exactly what's going to happen at 5. That's really the wild card in this whole thing.
Well, it's weird because, you look at combination of positional need and, who goes in the top 10 and that, and, there's one defensive tackle that I think is worthy of a top 10 selection, assuming his, background stuff checks out, Jalen Carter. There's one pass rusher in Will Anderson. There's a lot of cornerbacks. There's a lot of, you
Yeah,
know, guys that Seattle's probably not going to consider. There's 4 quarterbacks that are going to go likely in the
right.
top 10. Um, and if you aren't in position to get
Yeah,
the one of
that's
those that you
yeah.
like, it ends up being like the trade back simply because if Will Anderson's gone and you aren't
But you've
sold
got to have a
on
partner.
Carter, yeah,
Yeah,
hopefully
you've got
someone
to
else
have a
wants it.
trade partner to be able to do it.
Hopefully Atlanta wants a quarterback and they're willing to move up to take the 4th one. Um,
Yeah, in my mock, Las Vegas drafted Will Levis at 7. The Devon Witherspoon's going to be there. Christian Gonzalez. This is why I'm thinking you'd picked Nolan Smith was available to you at 20.
20.
Uh, but I could see Seattle dropping back and picking Nolan Smith, even if it's at 9.
Yeah, 9 or
Or
10, and yeah,
yeah, yeah, or Peter Skoronsky to move inside and play guard for them potentially.
God, I
A guy
don't
like
use a top 10 pick on the guard.
Quentin Johnston, the wide receiver, could be in play.
Yeah.
Joey Porter, you talked about Joey Porter being a pick in a previous mock. They might think that Joey Porter's worthy of a top 10 pick and go in that direction. I don't know. You got to pick somebody. You
Mhm.
can't keep trading back from 5. We would just lose our minds if they drop back into the mid-teens eventually, maybe two drop backs. They'd pick up that value. And this is obviously a deep draft, but you'd lose that premier opportunity at 5. It's tough that move that, when we lost that third pick, we were there sitting there for quite a while during the season. In that last game, we ended up falling to the 5th pick. It really gets squirrely right there, depending on what teams in front of you do. And if
Yeah,
somebody
'cause
comes
if
up
you're at the
to
3rd pick,
Arizona, if somebody comes up with Arizona's pick and gets in there and Arizona drops back, that could potentially mean that 4 quarterbacks are taken in the first 4 picks. That would be
well,
very, very beneficial for Seattle.
And then you've got Will Anderson just sitting there. So yeah, that would be
Yes.
beneficial. The other thing is if somebody moves up with Arizona and takes Will Anderson, and Arizona decides, we can get Jalen Carter at, later because he's going to drop and we're okay with his off-field stuff. And, that could possibly put the Seahawks in a position to get a quarterback if they really like Anthony Richardson. And,
Yeah, right.
that causes him to drop
It
and be
depends on
available.
what Indianapolis does, obviously, because the rumor has it Bryce Young's going to go, but maybe Bryce Young drops a little bit. CJ Stroud goes number 1 overall. Maybe the Texans fall in love with Anthony Richardson. That really sets in motion a thing that, I'm not particularly enamored with Will Levis, but if Will Levis is sitting there at 5, do you want the Seattle Seahawks to draft Will Levis at 5 overall? I'm not sure. I
See,
mean,
I would much rather have Will Levis than Anthony Richardson or even Bryce Young.
agreed, but I just
To
don't
me,
want to
he's the
draft
number
a
2
quarterback
quarterback.
to draft a quarterback. I want to make sure that he's a good fit in the scheme. The Seattle really has done their homework. He's the guy. They feel like they can overcome some of the inaccuracy issues that he had, based on the fact that he played under a poor offensive line and all that kind of stuff. He didn't have the weapons. They've done that, and he's the pick. I'll get behind that 100%. I'm just not sold on it.
Yes, I think he's the number 2 quarterback in this draft class. And I would take him. I wouldn't think twice about it. This is a guy with, you know, very high end potential, and uh, I think he's going to be. I think he's going to be a really good pro. Like I said, Bryce Young has better tape, but he's freaking tiny. And I don't know if he's going to last. Um, he is Murray, the quarterback in Arizona, but without the athleticism. And Murray can't stay healthy, and he actually has the athleticism to make people miss. Young doesn't. Now his tape's great, but I don't see him. Things get harder. There's very rarely a clean pocket in the NFL,
Mm-hmm.
and he had nothing but clean pockets in college. So I think that I would take Will Levis, who was always under pressure on every throw in college. Um,
And played in our offense.
yeah, like I said, and was under pressure on every throw, and was throwing to guys that were covered because nobody could get open for him on every throw. I would take that over
Interesting.
over the. I mean, I honestly think he's the second best prospect in this draft.
Wow. That's going to be fun. Lots of fun. All right, let's get out of here, Keith. You can find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. You know where the show's at. Hit the subscribe button. If you're finding us on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. 3 shows a week, even in the off season. It's one of our favorite times of the year, and then all through the season as well. So yeah. So until next time, go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.